So the class is being recorded as always. Again, today, inshallah, marks the end of our efforts with Plato. And like I said before, the recording Plato and philosophy, kindly mute your mic. Okay, so again, I was talking about what we are doing tonight, and I said that's the rest of Plato. We have done Plato, and by now we're familiar with who Plato is and what Plato stands for. If we talk about Plato, we talk about philosophy, and of course, if we talk about philosophy, we talk about using this upper part, our head and our mind. Again, we're using, of course, this is an invitation for people to always use their minds, but in our, or for our present purposes, we're doing it with traditions, and to be more specific, to moral tradition. So it's about not taking stuff for granted. It's about asking questions. It's about asking why this, excuse me, and not that. This is what philosophy is all about, and this is what the chapter is all about. If you still remember, last time we spoke about, the fact that we have two schools when it comes to tradition. We have the school of moral traditionalists, those who believe that we should take tradition for granted, we should practice them without asking questions. And we have rationalists or moral rationalists who believe that everything under the sun should be questioned and challenged, and why not tradition? So tradition should be, according to moral rationalists, should be also should undergo scrutiny. Scrutiny means that you challenge the ideas, you dispute the ideas, and see which of them is correct and which of them is not, based on and your test, or your testing tool here would be your mind, your brain, and your power of reason, and your power of the intellect. So this is what we are going to learn eventually. This seems to be the message that the writer of the chapter is trying to communicate to us. How does he do that? He does that through using material by Plato, in which Plato is having those lovely conversations and dialogues where he pits people against each other, and out of the conversations and out of the challenges that they mount against each other, we come not only with material, not only with ideas, we also come with methodology as how we can exercise our powers of reason. Again, at the core of philosophy, there is going to be also logic. Logic is everything. Being logical is just about everything. I normally equate logic with existence. Existence without logic is mere, absurdity, if you like, where you're doing stuff just you're following, other people do, and without asking any questions, without seeing any logic or any logical organization, and you're just doing it. This is futile, and this is absurd. Again, the lesson, or the moral lesson, the moral of the story, this chapter around, would be that people should exercise their power of the intellect, whether we're talking about tradition or any other matter, any aspect of life. Okay, so let me go to the PowerPoint that I'm having tonight, and let's first of all share it and see how. So can you see that?
Yes.
Yes, we
Okay,
can
good.
see it.
So these are kind of snapshots or screenshots that I have taken from the book. I left out those that are not as important. So this is very focused. You're familiar with how with the mirror of the chapter and the outline of the chapter in terms of the ideas and their page number and everything else. So I'm not going to go over that anymore. Um, so if you still remember when we spoke about the chapter, we said that we're going to have extracts or passages from the Lacus, and Lacus or Lacus and whatever the pronunciation is a dialogue or a conversation written by the ancient Greek philosopher Plato, and by now you know that Plato is um, one of those great Greek philosophers. We spoke whenever we speak about Plato, we also speak about Socrates, his mentor, and we also talk about his student, Aristotle. So Lacus is what we're doing, and it's not only Lacus. In order to be perhaps more accurate, it's Lacus and uh, Meno. Meno is also another dialogue, and we're going to take an extract from Meno because it is going to prove something, as you're going to see. So, what would be the ultimate aim? The ultimate aim, or one of the ultimate aims, would be to, by reading these extracts, you'll discover how Plato uses philosophical argument to question traditional beliefs. So it's Plato on the one hand and traditional beliefs on the other. And what's the link? Where we have Plato, the rationalist philosopher, who is trying to kind of challenge traditional moral beliefs. So why would he challenge them? Because he is of the school that promotes the idea of using one's mind. You shouldn't be, according to Plato and the other rationalist philosophers, our minds were not created for nothing. They have a function and they have to exercise this function. The function would be to not to take stuff for granted. You have to question and challenge ideas. Whatever is perhaps consistent with the mind, we take. Whatever is not consistent, whatever we think is perhaps supernatural, perhaps illogical, we don't take. And this is obviously fair enough. And this is actually what we do intuitively, without having to hear about Plato, for example, or philosophy. We do it. Whatever we think is consistent with our minds, we accept. Whatever we think is not logical, of course, we don't. Again, we're doing that um, by using philosophical texts, and philosophical texts are not just another texts. They are not, for example, newspaper articles that you can digest and read very easily. No, philosophical texts are very heavy-handed. Heavy-handed in the sense that you have to perhaps read once and then you read one more time. You need to have an eye for details. Details are very important, and the wording is very. You have to be careful about what word is used and what word is not used. So, in order to handle philosophy and philosophical texts, you have to be on the alert about the words and the structures and the meanings. It's not about reading the lines, it's about reading between and beyond the lines. So good strategies to read philosophical text would be you begin by reading the whole section in order to get the gist. The gist means the overall idea, the main idea. And then after that, when you read again, you focus on the sentences and the paragraphs where the key points are. The idea, this applies to philosophy and any other text that we're dealing with. The idea of underlining and highlighting. The idea of annotating. If you have done EL118, you know what annotating means. Annotating means that you take the keywords and the key expressions or phrases and put them on either side of the page. You put them on the margin because, like we always say, our minds and our memories are very short. You cannot remember everything. So in order to get back to the ideas, in order to kind of retrieve them, you need something to remind you of those ideas. So in this case, you would annotate. You put keywords on either side of the page, or you highlight, and then you go to the highlighted parts or the words that you have taken to the margins, and then when you look at them, they trigger the ideas that you have read about in the text. Again, it's always good to also rephrase and to also write the stuff in your own words, but you don't have to be rephrasing or rewriting or taking down notes should not be done in a word-to-word way. No, you don't have to be too, literal when it comes to reproducing what you have understood. Things will slip, which is fine. You don't have to worry about not remembering everything when you rewrite the stuff. So these are all ideas and tips as how you can approach philosophical texts. Our main focus would be on traditional beliefs, on tradition. To be more specific, on moral traditional beliefs, and the challenge that Plato is posing or is mounting against moral tradition. So let's start with defining what traditional beliefs are, and then we go from there. If you still remember, we said that there are lots of things in life, in our daily life, that we take for granted, that we don't question. For example, if you have a headache, you would turn to a friend or to one of your parents, and you ask for something for the headache, and they would they would recommend a remedy or a kind of medication. In most of the cases, we take the medication without asking any questions. Again, why are we doing that? Because we take it for granted that our parents perhaps know better, because they belong to perhaps an older generation, and they have perhaps inherited this knowledge about this kind of medication from their perhaps parents. So you have this chain of generations that are recommending the medication for you, but you don't stop and ask why this medicine and perhaps not another medicine. This is called tradition. When you get knowledge about something, it doesn't have to be knowledge, it can be knowledge and even practices. When you inherit practices and knowledge from older generations, and you regulate your life, and you act and react as inspired by those practices and those not those pieces of knowledge that you have. Again, these are beliefs that you inherit, and one of those beliefs will be about this kind of remedy. Okay, and those beliefs are traditional because you get them down from an old generation, and the old generation gets them from an older generation. So this is what we call traditional beliefs. This is beliefs. Okay, so they are tradition, and they are traditional in the sense that you have to go by them. If you don't go by them, if you don't regulate your life using them, it means that you are perhaps dissenting. Remember, we spoke about dissenting. You're not showing enough respect to them. You're not honoring them, and that would be a problem, of course, sometimes. Okay, so um, we're talking about beliefs that have been handed down from one generation to another. And we treasure those beliefs, those sets of tradition. We treasure them very much, to the extent that if somebody starts to perhaps question them or challenging them, he has a problem, and we have a problem with him. Okay. Do we kind of test the truth of these or those beliefs? No, we don't. We take them at their face value because they come to us from an old generation that we respect and honor, and also because they are those sets of beliefs, those sets of traditional beliefs are agreed upon by the majority of population, by the different members of the community. So if as an individual you come and you try to challenge them, it means that you are perhaps disrupting the harmony and the unity of this community, and you're confusing people. People are so set in their old ways, and they don't want to change. They don't see the value of change. And as an individual, sometimes you cannot convince them because you are one and they are a group. It's this idea of one to many. So, of course, the many always win. And it's very difficult to convince, as an individual, as one, to convince people that whatever you're saying is perhaps worth the thought, worth considering. Again, so a belief that has been passed down from one generation to another, and that someone has simply absorbed from other people without examining it for him or herself. So again, it's about inheriting the belief, and it's about not being ready to examine it. So you don't examine it, of course, for obvious reasons. What are these reasons? You don't examine it because these traditional beliefs are shared by the members of a community. So as long as all members of the community act in accordance with traditional beliefs, everyone will know what kind of behavior to expect from everyone else. So people will get on with each other. So that this harmony, that those moral beliefs are, making available. So if individuals start questioning traditional beliefs, there will be confusion and conflict, and this is, of course, something that the different members of the community wouldn't like. Again, this is one reason why it's difficult to challenge those beliefs. Another idea would be the fact that those traditional beliefs have a long history, and they reflect the experience and wisdom of many generations. So again, if you come as an individual and you try to say that we can improve on those sets of traditions and those sets of moral beliefs, they would say, no, you're only an individual. We've been trying those kinds of beliefs for quite some time. They work well for us. So again, the idea of drawing on your own personal experience or through reflection wouldn't be accepted with people. Again, the idea that you do, remember the first reason why people wouldn't let go of their moral and traditional beliefs would be one reason would be the fact that those beliefs are shared by perhaps the entire community. Again, so they are not convincing you. They don't care very much whether those beliefs are correct or wrong, true or false. Perhaps it would be more convincing if we go to the second reason why people are, have this kind of respect to those beliefs, and they embrace them. Of course, the idea that they tell you that those beliefs are have been tested by different generations, and they think that they work well. Again, if you come to the equation of the one and to the many, so the many will win. The many generations that came before and that have provided those sets of beliefs and traditions. Um, Again, we're talking about moral beliefs, we're talking about tradition, and we have this idea that tradition is the best source of moral beliefs. Again, if you have people who embrace and promote this idea that tradition is the best source of moral beliefs, you are in front of people that we call moral traditionalists. So the trend or the idea or the phenomenon is called moral traditionalism. So moral traditionalism is about accepting moral beliefs at their face value, never challenge them, never taking them for granted, practicing and exercising them without asking any questions. This is moral traditionalism, and we have also moral rationalism, which is, of course, the opposite. Moral rationalists are those who believe that moral beliefs are fine, but they have to stand the test of logic and the test of reason. If they stand the test of, of reason, and if they can't stand that, we accept them. If we challenge them using our reasons or our mind, and they don't hold, they perhaps prove false or prove irrational, we don't accept them. So most of the philosophers, because they use their minds, are in favor of moral rationalism, and they are against the idea of moral traditionalism. Where does Plato stand? Of course, he is a rationalist, and he is a moral rationalist who, of course, believes that we have to kind of challenge moral beliefs. We have to kind of test them, and if they prove correct, it's okay. If they don't prove correct, so we shouldn't adopt or embrace them. So he is a moral rationalist, and this is typical. As a philosopher, he uses his mind, and he wouldn't take moral beliefs for granted. He has, as a philosopher and as a rational philosopher, he has to only accept those beliefs that can be rationally defended and explained. Uh, so, so reason, not tradition, is the proper basis for our moral beliefs, according to Plato and the moral rationalists. Again, it's not about saying that moral rationalism is perhaps better than moral traditionalism. We have to demonstrate and show that. And this is what we're having tonight. In this chapter, we will discover how Plato uses rational argument to question traditional beliefs, and we will investigate. So, when you investigate, of course, you use your mind. We will investigate why he held that we should look to reason rather than tradition to ground our moral beliefs. So the big question, and this is a little bit early, but I thought of, I have reshuffled, shuffled in the chapter, and I brought things that were supposed to be taught at the end, and I brought them forward and stuff. So again, our last point, if you still remember, was about moral beliefs, and it was about Plato challenging those moral beliefs and moral tradition. So why does Plato reject tradition? So again, obviously he has not only challenged them, he also rejected them. So does he have, good enough reasons why he would reject tradition? Yes, he has. So again, the question that we are raising in this chapter would have to do with Plato rejecting moral beliefs. So why does Plato think that our moral beliefs should be grounded on reason rather than tradition? And why does he reject moral traditionalism in favor of moral rationalism? Again, as you're going to see, he will focus on the idea of using our minds, the idea of asking the right questions, on the idea of understanding something. And also the idea of gaining knowledge about something. So it's knowledge, and it's not only knowledge that he wants. He wants knowledge and the understanding of this kind of knowledge. If you still remember, when we spoke about traditional beliefs, we said that traditional beliefs are beliefs that we take on trust. On trust, it means that we don't question, we accept as is without reflecting on them. So for Plato, beliefs of this kind are merely opinions. So he is making this distinction between knowledge and opinion. Opinions are, think. I would like you to think of the difference between knowledge and opinion. Opinions differ from one person to another, while if knowledge is also practiced, if knowledge is, you take the knowledge to the next level and try to kind of test and try to kind of make sure that something really works. This is, of course, different from forming opinions, and you don't even form opinions; you inherit those opinions. Okay, and obviously, you yourself, if you are inheriting the opinions of other, you didn't try those opinions, you didn't reflect on what they mean. So it's only natural that they stay mere opinions. So again, Plato is stressing the fact that it is only by reflecting on and reasoning about our moral beliefs that we can turn them into knowledge. Okay, so you look at them, you reflect on them, you use your mind in order to make sense of those moral beliefs, and in this case, if you take all this time doing it in the way that Plato is asking you to do it, using your mind and reflecting and reasoning, in this case, you would turn those moral beliefs into knowledge. If you don't do any of that, if you don't use your own power of reason, it means that they are going to stay mere opinions. So again, we're not questioning the validity of those traditional beliefs. We're not saying that they are false or correct. Plato's concern is that traditional beliefs, even if they are true, are merely second-hand opinions, which do not amount to knowledge. Okay, so you are not exercising, or you're not making any efforts. People are giving you opinions, and you accept those opinions as is without questioning them. And of course, you question them using your mind. And this is something that Plato wouldn't recommend. Again, if you go back to this headache thing that we spoke about, you have a headache, and you take the opinion of other people as how you can cure this kind of headache that you have. So people give you different opinions. Okay, so your opinion, and if you go and use this or that medication, this is mere opinion. It's not even a first-hand opinion because you didn't come up with it. You are receiving second-hand opinions. Again, that would apply to things that we do in life, and it would also apply to philosophy and the philosophical traditions. Philosophical ideas that we also, and philosophical beliefs that we also get from other generations. A set of beliefs that pass down from one generation to another. So if you follow them as is, they are mere second-hand opinions. And of course, if you use them, it means that you are parroting other people's opinions. So it's not genuine. This is not genuine, beliefs or ideas, because you are depending on other people. Um, in one of the intellectual and philosophical encounters that we'll have in a few minutes, you're going to have one of the main characters in the dialogue by the name of Nicias. He will challenge Socrates and is going to tell Socrates that I am giving you the ideas that you yourself have spoken about. And Socrates would tell him, so it means that you're parroting my ideas. It means that you're not genuine. You haven't used your mind. You haven't put those opinions to the test. And it means that they stay opinions and they never turn into knowledge. Okay. Again, the idea would be to change opinions into knowledge. How would you do that? You would do that if you exercise your power of reason, according to Plato. Am I making sense so far? Do you guys have any questions?
No, doctor, thank you.
Oh,
No, doctor, thank you.
okay. So we spoke about Plato, Socrates, and we said that the Socrates that we have in the dialogue, in Lycos and the other dialogues, is the fictional Socrates. It's not the historical Socrates. And the reason why we're making this distinction, because people take it for granted because of how important and how influential Socrates is, that Plato is reproducing the ideas of Plato. Plato says no. And the reason why I'm featuring Socrates in my work is because he is my mentor, and I'm trying to immortalize him. I'm trying to give him immortality. He wants to live for generations to come, because he himself, Socrates, never wrote anything. So it's not about reproducing the same ideas, Plato is saying. He's saying, no, I have my own ideas and I have my own conclusions. Okay, so Socrates, as we see him in the dialogues, and one of them is Lacus, is discussing a range of philosophical issues with other people. And those other people, some of them are well-known figures at the time, and some of the dialogues are named after those other characters. Yeah, for example, when you talk about the Lacus, you know that there is this historical Lacus who happens to be a military leader or a general in the Athenian or in the Greek army at the time. So the Lacus, for example, takes its name from the Athenian general Lacus, who plays an important role in the discussion. Again, do we have actual conversations, a reproduction of actual conversations? No, of course not. You may be familiar with the names from history because they have historical presence. They were there at one point, but the ideas and the conversations are fictional, and they are made up in order to deliver certain ideas, of course, by Plato. You wouldn't look at the conversations and the dialogues as historical accounts. No, they are literary creations. And Plato was very talented when it comes to, very poetic when it comes to, writing and stuff. So it's you have this sense of poetry in his work, and of course, his work is rooted in philosophy. Um, again, so is it about philosophical ideas that we're having? It's not only philosophy and philosophical ideas that we're having. We also have philosophical methods and philosophical practices. So Plato is doing two things actually. He is trying to give us ideas, philosophical ideas, and he's also giving us the tools, the mental and the intellectual tools that we can use in order to handle and address them. Okay, the philosophical ideas that we're going to have will focus on the idea of courage, what courage means, and the definition of courage, and people would engage in in discussions about what the true nature of courage and stuff. But so this is the ideas, this is the material, this is the philosophical material that we have, and we also have the method. The method to discuss this philosophical material is the Socratic method. Socrates has his own philosophical method, and this philosophical method depends on the idea of asking questions. And when people answer you, you don't say the question is correct or wrong. You challenge the answer, and then you ask further questions. And this sometimes gets on the nerves of those who answer the questions. Socrates never ends the conversation. He keeps asking questions, and when they ask him about the answer key, if you like, when they ask him about model answers for the questions that he poses at the end, he says, "I don't know." So people um, start to say, "You don't know," and you're asking and asking, and perhaps you're deceitful. Perhaps you're deceiving us. You know the answers, but you don't want to share them with us. Again, Plato is going to perhaps interfere, and he's going to make it a point that Socrates is not deceitful or anything. It's only part of his method, and the idea of inquiry, and the fact that he makes you inquire about whatever he is asked, as we're going to see. Um, Again, Plato presents Socrates as interested primarily in moral questions. So those moral, he is interested in the qualities or the virtues that people need in order to live a good life. This is his main concern. So, what qualities or virtues do people have in normal in life? Things that virtues and qualities that would regulate your life, so you eventually live a good life. You talk about piety, when you talk about friendship, temperance, and justice. When you talk about courage, so these are the qualities that Socrates tries to promote. In every dialogue that Plato has, we have one of these qualities dominating, and the discussion is revolving around it. In the Lachos, for example, the main concern is with the nature of courage. So in the Lachos, Plato and his mouthpiece, Socrates, are discussing courage and the nature of courage. In other, like I said, in other dialogues, you would have piety being discussed, friendship being discussed, temperance, justice, and so on and so forth. Again, like we said, typical of Socrates, he doesn't try to answer the questions himself. He raises and asks the questions, but he never answers. Again, he proceeds by asking other people what they think. And it is also very interesting that he doesn't just choose anybody to talk about or to answer the question. He chooses people that are perhaps experts in the field. If he talks about courage, you would see him bringing to the conversation military leaders, because obviously, the military is about courage, is about showing this kind of courage and standing your ground in front of the enemy and stuff like that. So again, he often picks people who might be expected to know about the issue. In the Lacus, for example, his question about courage is addressed to two military generals. Okay? Again, typical of his method, once the other person has given an answer, Socrates puts it to the test by asking a series of further questions. Again, Socrates presents himself as adding nothing to the discussion. He only poses the questions and he tweaks the answers so that they can lead to other questions. So he simply asks questions without putting forward opinions of his own. And of course, the point would be to investigate whether the person's answers are consistent with other things that he said at one point, or that he believed in. Again, that might be like I said, intriguing and even irritating and annoying to people. Again, so you ask me a question, I give you an answer, and then you ask me another question. It never ends. So if it never ends, it means that I wouldn't be able to give you the answers that you need. It seems that we're moving in a vicious circle. Of course, Socrates, with his toolkit of logic and reason and intellect, would prove the other characters strong, and then asks new questions based on their answers. So the dialogues generally end with the other characters baffled and frustrated. They are baffled. Baffled means confused, and they are also frustrated because When you come up with an answer after thinking, you you think that that would be it, and then he starts to ask you questions. But this is kind of irritating and very annoying, and you also get confused. You don't know how to answer the question. So actually, it's you feel that you're being insulted by asking you further questions, by perhaps proving you wrong. You feel that you are being insulted. So some of those people become extremely annoyed. Um, Again, we're stressing the fact that there is one frequent complaint about Socrates, and it's the idea that he can get you upset because of his style. So some of Plato's characters, and even some of the readers, are irritated and annoyed by Socrates' refusal to put forward views of his own. If I give you answers to your questions, and you keep refusing those answers, you keep rejecting them, and you keep proving them wrong, at the end, I will say, okay, come forward with your answers. Where are your answers? Where are your views? Why don't you share them with us, Socrates? If you're that ready to criticize the views that we put. And Socrates would simply say that he genuinely does not know the answers to the questions that he is investigating. Um, Yet he does seem to make some philosophical assumptions. He says that I'm making assumptions, and assumptions are, with assumptions you don't normally ask whether those assumptions are correct or wrong. I'm putting forward the assumptions, not the opinions, not the views, because I don't have any, because I don't know the answers. He says that those assumptions help to determine the question that I ask and the lines of argument that I develop. Again, typically, conversations with Socrates often take certain recognizable terms, returning to the same points again and again. And it looks as if Socrates is being deceitful, especially when he says that I don't know the answers to the questions. Again, it's this idea of the fact that he leaves people baffled and confused and irritated. Again, it doesn't seem that Plato is trying to show that Socrates is being deceitful or being a cheat or something. He's simply trying to use Socrates' methods in order to perhaps arrive at the intellectual conclusions that he has in mind. So the question remains, why does Plato present him, of course, is a reference to Socrates, as denying that he knows the answers to his questions, while at the same time he favors some answers over others. So again, why Socrates does not know the answers, and why Plato will not tell us what they are. Again, we said that this is puzzling and this is confusing and this gets on people's nerves. So Plato's portrayal of Socrates as somebody who does not give answers, as somebody who claims that he does not know how to answer his own questions, while at the same time appearing to favor certain answers. If you favor answers, it means that you have an answer in mind, and these answers that people are giving you and that you favor are consistent with your answers. So this is baffling and this is puzzling because it would give people the feeling that something fishy is being is taking place, and that Socrates is deceitful and everything. Again, Plato would indirectly interferes to make this distinction between true opinion and knowledge. And again, he would suggest that what people are giving are, they don't arrive at true opinions. Or knowledge for that matter. They normally give opinions that they inherit, and of course, opinions do not amount to knowledge. Again, there is something about Socrates, about his philosophy that people misses. Socrates stresses the fact that I may have my own opinions, and I may have my own knowledge about and even the answers, but I don't know why they are true. For example, I can give you an answer, but I'm not sure that the answer that I'm giving is true. That's why I don't give you the answer. So why don't I know whether the answer is true or not? Because I haven't tried it myself. So he may be aware that he cannot explain why they are true. So then, in Plato's view, Socrates is right to deny that he knows the answers to his question. Okay? So it's not that I don't know the answer entirely. I know the answer, but I'm not sure why this answer and not other answers are correct. Again, one other reason why he's not getting answers, he's trying to, if after, perhaps, and I'm assuming that he knows the answers and he knows that those answers are correct. He knows. So what about others? He wants other people to go through the process that he himself goes through in order to come up with the answer, which is obviously very rigorous, which is obviously sometimes very difficult, moving from one question to a further question to a further question. So he wants people to arrive at conclusions of their own, not to depend on his opinion, because again, depending on his opinion would be mere opinion. Uh, in this case, your opinion does not amount to knowledge. He wants you to keep asking yourself the questions, to keep trying and trying and trying, so that the opinions that you may have inherited from other people turn into knowledge. And how do they turn into knowledge? By you testing them using the power of reason and your mind. So Socrates does not try to import. Import means give. To give does not try to give his opinions to the other characters by delivering a lecture. Again, you also need to know that this was Socrates' style of perhaps teaching, if we can call what he was doing teaching. It's not a class where you have a tutor or a teacher and a number of students, and the teacher does everything or gives everything. No, this is not what Socrates' method is about, and this is what Plato's views on knowledge are about. Okay, so Socrates does not try to impart his opinions to the other characters by delivering a lecture. Instead, his questions encourage them to think about the issues for themselves. Even us in the teaching styles of today, the modern teaching styles. Remember, if you're teachers yourself, you start by asking students questions before before you give them the lesson, in order to get to know how much do you know about the subject. Don't we do that? I think we all do that. Sometimes you give them a picture and you try to ask them to unpack the picture. You try to stimulate their minds, right? And this is exactly what Socrates is doing. Socrates is saying that I'm not giving a lecture where I have to provide all the answers. No, this is not a lecture. I'm trying to ask questions so that I can encourage people to think about the issues for them, to use their own minds. So, of course, the questions would lead, to other questions and to conclusions. So again, this discussion cannot proceed unless they have understood and agreed to each step in the argument. So I make it a point that we don't leave the question and we don't leave the answer that they give until they have agreed that perhaps what they said is wrong, and then they try again. I ask them a further question that would help and that tweak the conversation a little bit. So again, what Socrates is doing and his method then can be used to help people achieve the kind of understanding that Plato believed was required for philosophical knowledge. And I'll show you a number of photos or pictures that would show you how Socrates was operating. Presumably he was a teacher and he has a number of students. But his style of teaching is obviously different. Let's look at this. What do you think of this? I would like you to look at the pictures. How many pictures do we have?
3.
Yes. Which of them is similar to our way of teaching, where, as you have seen, I have been giving everything for the past 45 minutes. I'm not giving you any chance to do anything. Which of them?
The first one, maybe?
Yeah, the first one from the left or from the right?
From the left.
Yeah, and I am this guy who is in front of the students and they are listening, obviously, to what I'm saying, right?
Yes.
Yeah, except for the fact that I'm not that blonde, right? Okay, so this is tradition, right? Where, as you can see, the teacher, this is what we call teacher-centered classes. So this is teacher-centered classes. So, of course, you know where the teacher is in a scenario like this one, right?
Yeah.
And you can almost expect that the teacher is giving everything, right? And the guys are opening the book and they are receiving the information, and this is not intellectually stimulating, right? Hence, bad. Okay. Right. Let's move to the second picture. What is the teacher here? And the second picture.
Maybe the one in the middle?
Yeah, we have so many people in the middle, right?
He's the one standing up.
Yeah, it depends on how you define the middle. And obviously your angle of vision would be different from perhaps my angle of vision, right?
The one standing on the left?
I think the one standing on the left.
Um,
Because all of them looking to have.
yeah. See. So we're confused because this is not a traditional class, right? Because obviously he doesn't have a board, or he is not sitting on something and then delivering a class and a lecture, do this, do that, it's about this and it's about that, right? So this is the Socratic method, by the way, where the questions are up for grabs, where the teacher asks questions and the students are on their way answering them, and then the teacher asks further questions and stuff, right? Yeah, honestly, what do you think? which style is perhaps more interesting and more engaging? To have the teacher saying everything like I'm doing right now, or to have the teacher asking questions and then you answer, and then he or she asks further questions, and it never ends. What do you think?
I think it depends on the subject.
It depends on the chapter.
Yeah.
If it's a Plato chapter, you'd rather have the teacher say everything.
Yes, true. But like the Cleopatra one, we enjoyed it, and we had like things to say.
Yeah, well, I think it was more of the Socratic kind when we did Cleopatra, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So what do you think? I'm asking you, are you all for diversity of style of teaching styles, or you like to stick to one single style of learning or teaching?
Diversity.
Diversity. It's always good to have diversity. So today I'm doing it in a traditional way. Tomorrow I'm doing it in a Socratic way. Okay. Perhaps the next week I'm doing it the Aristotelian way. By the way, if you go down, do you see the third picture?
Yes.
This is a
Yes.
totally different style, by the way. And this is the Aristotelian style. They call it
Everyone.
where people walk. They discuss stuff while walking. They don't stand. They don't. I'm sorry. They don't sit.
They
They
discuss it in groups.
they discuss things while walking, and they call
They
it
look.
al-masha'iyya. This is the Aristotelian style of teaching, where he and his perhaps pupil or student walk perhaps by the sea or by a river. They perhaps go on mountains, and they keep discussing stuff. This is also a style. I mean, the
Entertaining
bar.
way to
What?
entertaining way to learn.
This is very interesting and very entertaining. Like, meaning, like, was it? Who is that? I think I know. I mean, I can recognize the voice, but I don't remember the name. It's Pascal.
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 Yeah.
Pascal. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Okay. Okay, so Plato's views on knowledge might explain why he chose to write dialogues rather than essays. Plato himself could have written essays where we read the essays, we understand them, and that would be. But he seems to be in favor of this Socratic method of inquiry and of learning. So by writing a dialogue, Plato, no less than exactly like Socrates, avoids simply presenting us with his opinions, but instead encourages us to reflect on the questions raised by his characters. Again, very Socratic. Okay, so again, the Socratic method when it comes to teaching and learning. Again, we have never quote Socrates speak about himself as a teacher. Remember, he says that I don't know the answers. And typically, I mean, our typical view of a teacher would be that he or she knows all the answers, right? Socrates does not make this claim. He doesn't say that I'm a teacher. And of course, he doesn't have any of the answers. So in his dialogues, Plato contrasts Socrates with other intellectuals who did present themselves as teachers. So I mean, down through the ages, you meet lots of intellectuals, lots of people, and they claim that they are teachers. So Socrates does not have any of those claims. He doesn't, of course, he doesn't pass on his nuggets of wisdom through lectures and books. Of course, I told you that Socrates never wrote anything. So again, this is keeping to his style, his style of asking questions, not providing essays and articles or books on this or that issue. Um, so, so now that we have read about this part, now that we have spoken about Socrates and his style, let's talk a bit about the qualities of a teacher and what makes a student, for example. So, and we're going to do that through a number of questions and perhaps adopting the Socratic method. So, is teaching just a matter of imparting means giving? Is teaching just a matter of imparting information or expertise? I'm asking you, do you think that teaching is only a matter of giving information or experience or expertise? Do you think this is what teaching is all about? Is giving information? What do you think of teaching? What do you think teaching is?
It's like sharing the knowledge you have to like people that isn't like
Are you still there, Pascal? Are you okay? So obviously, there is more to teaching than just giving information or perhaps transferring a skill, right? Um, that can be an aspect of teaching, but also there are other aspects that some people may not be aware of. The Socratic method, for example, is can be a form of teaching, right? And if you talk about teaching, you also have to talk about learning and studying. So learning the side of the student, while teaching would be the side of the teacher. So is studying or learning just a matter of taking in new information? Is this what you do all the time? You just take down or you take in information? Or yeah, go
Um,
ahead, go ahead.
I guess teaching or like learning new things is not just about learning new information. It's about how
Mm,
we can like work or activate this information in our daily
yes,
lives if it's
yeah.
like suitable.
Mm. Yeah,
And
I mean, they inspire you, they make you do stuff, right?
yes, to improve our
Mm.
lives better,
Yeah,
to look at things differently in different
that,
aspects
yes,
and point of
interesting.
views.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, there is obviously more to learning and more to teaching than just information. Okay, it's about transferring worldviews, ways of life, and you yourself choose the one that you see fit, right?
Yes, exactly.
So Socrates' method has had a profound influence on the theory and practice of education. Yeah, lots of schools and colleges are using this method. I mean, the idea of asking questions and asking further questions. So his name is associated with a model of education in which the process of learning begins from the student's own beliefs and experience. And the role of the teacher here is not to give information, but to engage students in critical discussion and to encourage them to inquire into the issues for themselves. So it's this for themselves that the whole thing is about. So you think for yourself, you inquire for yourself, and you don't inherit opinions and ideas by other people, and you never challenge them. This is not what learning is or should be about. Again, the more approaches, the better, like we said. You shouldn't be dealing with teaching material in one single way. You can have different ways, and it depends on even the material that you're dealing with. Yeah, I mean, teachers are invited all the time to uh, choose the best method based on what material they are teaching. That's why we keep asking teachers to prepare, to plan ahead, because by planning ahead, they look at the material that they are going to teach and they choose the best method to deliver the material to the teachers, to the students. Yes. Okay. So now let's go all the way to the demonstration part. We've been talking about theory for quite some time. We have been talking about Socrates and his Socratic method. Now we're going to see Socrates and his colleagues uh, operating in action, if you like. Again, the material that we're having is taken from a dialogue by that is called Lachus, where Lachus happens to be one of the characters. And of course, we'll have, along with Lachus, we will have Nicias and we will also have Socrates. So, what's the scenario? What's the background? We have two Athenian gentlemen. We have Lysimachus and we have Milesius. And those two guys, of course, they are Athenian, and they met and they are discussing the future of their sons, what kind of education they should provide their sons with. I mean, and they started to kind of brainstorm for ideas, and one of them, or perhaps the two, came up with the idea that if they give their sons a course of fighting in armor, which is the equivalent of martial arts nowadays, they would foster and promote courage and self-discipline in them. They actually didn't agree on that. I mean, one of them came up with the idea that we need to, kind of have them foster courage, and in order to do that, they have to perhaps do a course in fighting. Um, Again, there is always a second opinion. They turn to Nicias and Lachus for perhaps inspiration and for advice. They went to Nicias and Lachus are generals in the Athenian army. Remember when we said that whenever you have those dialogues or dialogues, the people involved in the dialogue are people who have experience and expertise, not just anybody in the marketplace. So Nicias and Lachus were asked to come over and kind of give advice as whether giving a course in fighting would foster courage and self-discipline in those young people's character. So Nicias and Lachus will discuss this idea, and again they are going to differ. They are not going to come to a total agreement on whether this proposal is valid or not. The idea that the kids should receive a course in fighting. Okay, so how are they going to handle that? They have been asked and they don't agree on the best kind of education, they are going to invite Socrates to help them. So Lagos calls on Socrates to help them to resolve the issue. And it's Socrates. You asked for it. So Socrates would, typical Nicias and Lagos are, of course, military leaders. They are not philosophers. So their way of thinking is different. They approach stuff in a different way. Lysimachus and Milesius are, lay people. They are, gentlemen, and then they are more likely to be close to and similar to Nicias and Lacus than to Socrates. Socrates is a philosopher, and of course, what to expect. Socrates is going to be talking about using our mind in order to check that. He's going to start off by saying that perhaps before talking about giving training in fighting, or we need to define what courage is. We need to define what education is. We need to perhaps define what parents' duties are. So his starting point would be, which is typical of philosophers, by the way. His starting point would be to talk about general ideas, not the other way around. So Lysimachus, Milesius, and even Nicias and Lacus start with whatever is specific and they move to whatever is general, while Socrates, the philosopher, is starting the other way around. He wants them to start with the general and then perhaps move to the specifics. So what are the generals in this argument, the general stuff in this argument? It would be education, it would be courage and what it means. Excuse me. Again, they are trying to foster virtues in their sons. Socrates would also ask them to define what you don't ask me about the best way to help people become virtuous before you ask me to define virtue and unpack what virtue means. He also suggests that they should address the question, what is courage? Again, it's the same way. So before talking about training in fighting, which is very specific, you should be talking about what courage means. Again, this Lacus is confident and is sure perhaps of himself, and is going to start to answer Socrates. Socrates is going to ask what courage is, and Lacus would ask for the chance to answer. Again, to Lacus' disappointment, Socrates is going to reject Lacus' first attempt at an answer. Lacus answers Socrates' question by describing how a courageous infantryman or infantryman is. How an infantryman behaves. Okay, so he says, okay, you're asking about the nature of courage, what courage is, and I'm telling you that you shouldn't look no further than what do they call them? The hope. I think they are called the hoplites. The hoplites, yeah, and the hoplites, and those hoplites are ancient Greek infantry people. Whenever there is a battle or a war, they of course, they are dressed in their armor, they have their shields and their kind of lances and everything, and they stand shoulder to shoulder, and they keep close to each other, and then they move, I think, in groups this way, in a lateral way. And whenever the enemy lashes at them, they stand their ground. They never waver and they never go back. So Lachus is saying that. So uh, obviously, you wouldn't find more courageous people than that. People who are ready to die, and they are not ready to kind of go back or retreat. So this is his excellent example of courage. So Socrates is going to say, so you're obviously limiting courage to the battlefield. So don't we have manifestations and demonstrations of courage outside the battlefield? Okay. And he's going to come up with examples that show that there is more to courage than just the battlefield. And of course, Lacus is going to admit that there are other manifestations of courage outside the battlefield. So in this way, Socrates is defeating Lacus and the definition of courage according to Lacus. So Lacus answers Socrates' question by describing how a courageous infantryman might behave. So, and I would like you to mark the word behave. We're talking about action, because somebody else is going to come over in a minute and talk about knowledge, the knowledge of something, not the behavior, not exercising it. Okay, but let's wait. So Lacus has answered Socrates' question by presenting a specific example of courage. Right? This is specific because he's not talking about all types of courage. He cannot, obviously, because we have different manifestations of courage. But he's focusing on one specific example of courage, which is the courage that we have in the battlefield. So as a result, his answer leaves out many other examples of courageous behavior, both on and off the field of battle. So what Socrates wants Lacus to do is to turn his attention away from the details of a specific example, and instead to identify the characteristic that all examples of courage have in common. So instead of talking about courageous individuals, instead of talking about courage in the battlefield, which is only one manifestation of courage, he wants to perhaps talk about what courage means and apply it to the different aspects of life. So as you can see, Lacus is losing a point here. So Socrates introduces definition of quickness in order to demonstrate the kind of answer that again, he doesn't just say, no, your answer is not acceptable or accepted and full stop. No, he demonstrates in order to show him how to think about it. So as you can see, so this exchange between Socrates and Lacus illustrates what is involved in asking a philosophical question. So it brings out the point that philosophy is typically concerned with questions of a very general kind. So we talk about general things. You don't talk about specific examples unless you have established the general idea. So as you can see, Lysimachus and Melesius ask about the education of their sons. And this is obviously this is a specific practical problem involving a specific group of people. So as you can see, specific problems can often draw our attention to philosophy. Yeah, you can start with them, but once you ask them, you need to go back to the general questions and start with them. So the situation of Lysimachus and Milesius might prompt questions not only about the nature of courage, but also about the purpose of education and about the duties that parents have towards their sons and daughters. So these are general. So when you answer these very general questions, that would take you, of course, beyond the particular circumstances. And of course, the idea would be dealt with on a more general plane and level. Again, typically as non-philosophers, as lay people, we ourselves, as people who are not trained in philosophy, we are normally busy with practical problems, and we don't normally reflect on the general questions and then the general ideas that those practical problems may trigger at the back of our minds. Again, typical of philosophers, they start with assumptions and they try to kind of challenge them and prove them and see whether they are correct or wrong. And if you think of assumptions, and you start to question them and challenge those assumptions, to reflect on them, you're doing philosophy. This is what philosophy is all about. Okay. So the answer of Lachus, the first answer, because obviously it's going to come back with another definition of courage. Lachus's definition, Lachus' answer is part of the Greek tradition when it comes to defining what courage is. So obviously he's not inventing it. He is only subscribing to an idea that he inherited from the old age. So he was born and raised to know that if you're courageous, it means that you work in the army, you defend your country, you stand your ground in front of the enemy, you never retreat. So those are traditional ideas, and Lachus is giving voice to them. Okay, but he's talking to whom? He's talking to Socrates, and Socrates represents Plato, and Plato, like is against the idea of not using your mind. Okay, so using your mind, how? You need to question those traditional concepts of courage that focus on the behavioral level, the fact that you have to behave in a certain way in the battlefield, right? Lachus is inheriting this concept of courage. He tells him, okay, so you're saying that courage is about standing your ground in the battlefield as an infantryman. So Lachus, what about those areas where we don't have a battlefield? And obviously there is more to life than just in the battlefield. I say, oh yeah, you're correct. What about those? And he admits that there is more to courage than just standing your ground in the battlefield. So the answer that Lachus gives to Socrates' question reflects traditional Greek views about the nature of courage. So in this traditional conception or concept, courage was associated with the qualities required of citizen soldiers fighting in defense of their city. Especially as hoplites, and I have see, look at this picture. Can you see this picture on the right?
No.
Yeah, this is a hoplite. Just wait. On the right, there is a picture of a soldier. Can you see that?
No.
So just you cannot, right? Okay, so this is an example of a hoplite, a Greek soldier dressed in armor, heavily armed. Okay, and this was the definition of courage. If you are in the army and if you are facing the enemy and you're standing your ground, it means that you are courageous, and this is the best example of courage. And this is what courage is according to. So hoplites were heavily armed soldiers who would fight in rows in which each man's shield protected not only his own left side but also the right side of the soldier standing next to him. So standing in the ranks and not running away came to be regarded as a paradigm of courage, and they would, of course, write, epics and write poems in order to glorify those military acts. So, as you can see, in rejecting this answer, in saying that this answer is not correct, Socrates is asking Laches to perhaps move beyond what was then the traditional conception of courage. Okay, so Laches is going to be given another opportunity, and he's going to come up with another definition of courage. Okay, so Laches produces a second definition of courage, and according to him, this time around, courage is endurance. Okay, so the first time, courage was about standing your ground in the battlefield. So this time around, the second definition, the second answer of what courage is the idea that courage is endurance. Socrates is going to say, fine, this is a good answer and everything. And then he is going to start to examine Laches's proposal. And then he's going to ask him a number of questions. And he's going to tell him that, how about foolish endurance? So endurance is good. To endure is to perhaps grin and bear. You show resilience. You show stamina. The ability to endure things. The ability to perhaps undergo hardships, and you accept them, you try to perhaps wait and stuff like that. He said that that's a very good definition, the fact that courage is endurance. But what about foolish endurance, ya Lachus? Foolish endurance. Can you give me an example of foolish endurance? You know what endurance? Let's establish what we mean by endurance, and then what we mean by foolish endurance. What is endurance? When you do what? This is endurance.
Probability.
What?
Probability.
Blah, blah, blah. What? No. No, it's not. No, it's not. It's not. Endurance is to be able to. Yeah,
Patience.
go ahead. What?
When you act patient, when you're
Yes, excellent. When you exercise patience,
Tolerance.
when you have fortitude, the ability to show patience. You have lots of difficulties, challenges, but you are being patient. You work under pressure. You never complain. You never say no. This is endurance, right? Which is good, right? It's not bad at all to show endurance, right?
of course.
But there are situations where endurance is foolish. I'll give you an example. If you don't like your work and you keep working, if you don't like your job and you keep, going to the job for years and years, this is endurance, right? But it's foolish endurance, right? Because you could have tried something else, right? Right?
Yes,
It
Yes.
but
means that
Yeah.
you're wasting your time, you're wasting your abilities, right?
There's something you don't have to endure.
Yes, you don't like Dr. Sameh, you don't like the way he teaches. Why endure him? Why go to some other teacher, right?
Yeah, if you have other options, of course.
Yeah, of course. There are it means that we are all bad. What's your name? You're losing 5 marks.
I'm very
Uh,
I think.
okay. So, keeping, when you keep doing something that you hate, and you're saying, "Nah, I'm patient. I'm showing patience, and that
I'm
this is a
okay.
good quality." Now, what?
Like you say, I'm okay. I'm strong.
This is no.
Yeah.
You're not okay. You're not strong, right? You're
Why?
wet. You're wet.
You're
Don't
oh,
say. Yes, absolutely. But this is, yeah, this is foolish endurance, and this is what um, Socrates raised Lash's, awareness about. He said, "Listen, there is more to endure. I mean, there is obviously different facets of endurance. Endurance can be good and everything, but there are situations where endurance can be bad or stupid or foolish. And if there is foolishness and stupidity to it, so it can be courage, can be anything else." So again, Lach's second answer is too general. It includes some cases that are not cases of courage. Okay? So, what do we have? This idea of asking and then you have answers and then asking. This is all called argument. This is a logical argument. Okay? So, as you can see, Lachus, when he presents those ideas, he presents them um, in a matter of fact way. Remember, he is a general, is not trained in presenting logical arguments. So, Socrates, because he wants to teach us all lessons in logic, in building arguments, is going to turn what Lachus is saying into logical arguments. And when we talk about an argument, we talk about you or anybody else for that matter trying to prove or to arrive at a conclusion, a logical conclusion. So, in order to arrive at the logical conclusion, you need to build up the argument. And the argument is normally made up of two things. You have what we call the claims. You make claims. You know what a claim is? When you say something that needs testing, so that I can know whether it is correct or wrong, whether it is true or false. This is called a claim. Like when I say, for example, that this chapter is the best of all possible chapters in the book. This is a claim. A claim how? Because you have to read the other chapters and you need to give me pieces of evidence that what you're saying is correct. This is a claim. Remember, when I say, for example, that the USA is the best country, this is a claim. You have to prove it, right? When I say that North Korea is the worst of all possible countries, this is also a claim. You have to prove it. Okay? So you normally have, when it comes to arguments, you have two claims, okay, which we call premises. We call them premises. So you have premise 1 and you have premise 2, claim 1 and claim 2. And then you have the conclusion that is, of course, based on the premises or the claims. Okay? So this is how arguments are developed. Like I said, you start with premises and then you perhaps pit the premises against each other and you arrive at conclusions. Am I making sense? Okay. Okay, so let's see how this is developed. Look at the argument. The argument towards the end of the slide. Can you see that? Premise 1, premise 2, conclusion. Can you see that?
No.
Very strange.
Yes.
Okay.
Premise
Can
is an
what? Come again? Can't you see that?
I can.
You
No,
can?
doctor. No, doctor.
Yes or no? Yes or no?
Yeah, no.
All of you?
No, I can see.
You can see it.
I
You
can see it.
It's very strange.
I
Mahmoud,
can see.
can you go out and come back? Perhaps. Yeah, I can see it myself. So I can see it, and we have a number of people who can see it. So obviously the problem is on your side, yeah, Mahmoud.
I see the screen and I can't see your face.
Yeah, of course, you don't need to see my face, and I'm talking about the
Me too.
slides.
I can't see you, doctor. Me too.
Yeah, you don't need to see me, يا جماعة. I'm sharing the slide.
لما نشوفك قلبنا يطمئن يا دكتور.
Okay.
We
I'm
want to
talking
see you,
about,
doctor.
I'm talking about the slides دلوقتي خضتوني. I'm talking
السلايد
about the
شايفيها
slides.
خلاص.
Type it. Okay, so as you can see, we have an argument, and it's a logical argument, a philosophical argument that is normally made up of premises and a conclusion. In Arabic, we call them, if you have done any logic or mantiq, if you have done any logic, they call them مقدمات ونتيجة. Okay, and the نتيجة is based on the مقدمات. And the muqaddimat or the premises have to lead to the natiga or the conclusion. Okay, and of course there is false logic. Sometimes you have the premises are not valid. I will talk about that. Okay, so let's read the argument, the philosophical argument. So premise 1: courage is an admirable thing. Admirable means it's something that you like. Premise 2: foolish endurance is not an admirable thing. Right? So what is the conclusion? So foolish endurance is not a kind of courage. Look at it, read it, and see whether you agree with the conclusion or not, based on the premises again. What do you think?
I agree.
Okay. So again, the premises would lead to the conclusion, as you can see. right? So courage is an admirable thing. Foolish endurance is not an admirable thing. Okay, so obviously courage is not, and I'm saying obviously because it's a logical or mental conclusion. So courage is not obviously foolish endurance. So you see, لاحظ, I mean, this is how you can convince people. If you address their mind, if you appeal to their mental and their intellectual, you know, the intellectual aspects in them. If you appeal to their intellect, you would win them over. But if you talk about things in an emotional way, perhaps in a traditional way, they wouldn't be convinced, right? And philosophy is about convincing people. And how would you convince people unless you address that sense of the intellect, right? Reason, mind, logic. Okay, I think I'll stop on this note, and we might. I think we'll have to have an extra class on Sunday, where we'll have only an hour, not more, because whatever is left is obviously way less than what we have covered already. What do you think of that?
Okay.
As you like, we don't mind.
As you like it, doctor.
Okay, so we're having an extra class, inshallah, on Sunday at 4 p.m. And I'll send you the link for this class. In the meantime, I would like you to read the whole chapter so that you can remember this is logic, this is, like I said, this is philosophy, and you will have to read a lot about that. I'll have the recording, inshallah, ready, and I'll share it with you, inshallah, perhaps in an hour or so. So until we meet again on Sunday, I wish you all the best and have a nice weekend. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you, you too.
You're
Thank
welcome.
Thank you, doctor.
Have a
Thank you,
nice
doctor.
day.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.